There's a common stereotype I've seen in films, TV shows, you name it. It's that gamers are usually adolescent boys who play violent shooters and are constantly moody. It's not necessarily a harmful stereotype, hell, it was true in my case and many of my friends' cases too. Back during ye olden times of the internet, there was a popular image I saw that still circulates to this day that's pretty lame, but it reminds me of something. It's dumb, but try to burn this into your retinas and keep it in mind for a little while. The combination of that early internet image, scenes from film, and my own personal recollection make me wonder, do violent video games create bad attitudes? Are adolescents naturally attracted to video games, and their hormonal changes throughout adolescence is what creates negative attitudes and not the games themselves? Do video games create toxic behavior online, or are toxic people simply attracted to video games? Is verbal violence caused by in-game violence?
Let's do this.
Call of Duty is one of the most popular franchises of all time, gaming or otherwise. If someone's out there who only buys 1 or 2 games a year, you can bet one of those is Call of Duty. When I was in junior high and high school, Call of Duty was just a way of life. If you weren't playing Call of Duty, you were nobody, and God forbid if you preferred Battlefield. I can't confirm if this is still how it is in high school, it's been a few years since then for me, but I was definitely there at the beginning of Call of Duty's skyrocketing popularity. I distinctly remember it making me so mad when I played it. I was always so frustrated whenever I got killed. It almost always resulted in rage quits, thrown controllers, or broken headsets. I was just so angry. Knowing the judgmental gaze of my classmates was upon me, it felt like I had something that needed proving, and that by failing I was digging myself a deep social grave. Video games had always been my thing, and if I couldn't prove that I was the best, it felt like I was losing the part of me that made me me. Not only that, but it felt like, as silly as it sounds, if I wasn't good at Call of Duty, I wouldn't be respected. I know it sounds stupid, but it wasn't at the time. Naturally, this gave me a bit of tood when confronted by family members. Interruptions felt like an impediment on my journey to be the best. Responsibilities like chores and schoolwork felt unnecessary. Getting A's on my homework assignments wasn't going to impress my friends, but maybe an extra prestige would. It didn't, at least not in any meaningful way. Regardless of the reasoning, the fact remains, video games are immersive. Whether it's to be the best online or to be whisked away on a journey, video games possess a nearly magical ability to create a mindset separated from reality, almost solely dialed in on the screen in front of it. Perhaps that's what creates the frustration, being immersed and enveloped in something and being ripped away from it. Knowing you're capable of something, but something getting in the way of that, be it lag or human responsibilities. It's important to note that I'm not trying to justify or make any excuses for rude behavior. I'm just trying to state why I believe things are the way they are, based on personal experience and observations of the gaming community as a whole. There's never really a good excuse for being an asshole. The hard part is knowing when you are being one.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
But these things can have extremely serious connotations. While I, based on evidence I'll discuss in the third part of this series, don't believe there's a direct link between video games and real-world violence, I do believe video games have the possibility to make people perform violent acts. Stick with me here. Oftentimes, people explode with anger. All of life's troubles boil up into a singular moment, and that person might lash out in a violent rage. Anything can cause this explosion to occur, video games included, be it due to frustration with the game itself, or, again, life's responsibilities getting in the way. See, my argument here isn't that video games cause violence, it's that they can sometimes act as a catalyst to anger. They're almost never the root cause of violence, but instead can be the thing that can turn someone from a calm and collected member of society into someone angrily tossing controllers around like a madman. And only if someone is already predisposed to violence would they then turn that violence onto a specific individual or a group of people. What about children then? Kids love to replicate certain actions, especially ones they think are cool. I do think that violent video games could have harmful effects on young kids, but not in a this kid is going to be a mass shooter kind of way, and more in a this kid might hurt themselves if they try to replicate the things they do in the game type of way. I think they could desensitize kids too, but there's really no way to scientifically prove it. I just think it's a reasonable possibility. That's not to say violent video games are guaranteed to turn young kids into bona fide sociopaths, but I do think they could affect how they perceive reality. I also want to note that the clip I'm showing here is an experiment that was done in the 1960s about the effects of replicating adult behavior, which is the main point I'm trying to make about all of this. Desensitization, rudeness, violence, whatever, it's not exclusive to video games. What it all boils down to as well is good parenting. Violent video games are typically rated M for mature, and if there's ever a day when they scientifically prove that violent entertainment can have negative effects on children's minds, it'd still be on the parents to to make sure their kids aren't exposed to, say, doom. I didn't touch an M-rated game until I was 13 with Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which, in retrospect, is relatively tame for an M-rated game. Regardless, never once have I felt the serious urge to do harm to another person, even after years of violent imagery being cultivated in my head. Games may have given me an angry or frustrated attitude as an adolescent, but I think since it's a time of great emotional and physical change, it's only natural. Nobody looks back upon their teenage years without cringing at least a little bit. So what is it that attracts adolescents to video games? I think it's fair to say that a negative attitude can stem from a variety of reasons, but what is it about video games that attracted and still attracts kids to these virtual worlds? Social elements are at play for sure. Fortnite and Call of Duty took off due to heavy emphasis on squatting up. I'm still telling friends to buy certain games like Rainbow Six Siege so we can play together at some point. Escapism is also a huge reason. As I said earlier, games have the magical ability to completely envelop the player in a new world. Nothing kills time or helps evade responsibility like getting lost in Skyrim, or hunting fantasy monsters in games like The Witcher or Monster Hunter. See, the thing that attracts kids to games is what attracts anyone to games. They're fun and engaging. It's simply a matter of when someone discovers their passion for gaming, and that usually happens in a major way during someone's teen years. It's those two factors that make people angry when playing video games too. We're immersed. When that immersion is broken by questionable controls, frustrating design, or other factors that can detract from an engaging experience, we as people get angry. From a purely social perspective, perhaps we get angry when teammates aren't up to snuff, when an iffy internet connection gets in the way, when life's responsibilities force us to step away. There isn't exactly a pause button for online games after all. It all comes from a lack of control, that feeling that something just isn't how it should be. That's called cognitive dissonance. The reasons people get angry at video games are the same reasons we love them. We love being immersed and being connected, but we get angry when those things aren't the way we'd like. It's true, some people are just angry. It definitely takes a certain kind of person, perhaps a mature one, to remain calm and in control when all signs should point to that person being very angry.
Insane.
I've also found that sometimes, the more you play a game, the more likely you are to be angry at it. The rose-colored glasses start fading, the honeymoon period is over. Perhaps you've improved tremendously in the past however many hours, and you understand how the game works on a micro and macro level. Regardless, it feels like sometimes the best criticism can come from people who love a game or play it frequently. I often see people ask those who are critical of a game they have hundreds of hours in, well, if you hate the game so much, why have you played it so much? And the answer to that is, quite simply, they don't hate the game. They're just frustrated at the thing they like and know it can be better. Maybe it isn't lining up to what they know it can be. Of course, this can also lead into the topic of entitlement, where it's not exactly something the developer can control, rather it's a case of expectations being too high. However, a discussion on anger-mongering YouTubers or gaming entitlement isn't something I'd like to create here, but perhaps in another series down the line. Regardless, I've always had one huge question about gaming since the day I stepped online. Why are people so mean? Is toxic behavior exclusive to violent video games, or do all games suffer from verbal violence? Allow me to preface this by saying that I'm going to be showing clips or images that may display the kind of toxicity I'd like to discuss. These may include some offensive or derogatory terminology. I'm in no way endorsing these, I'm merely showing them as examples to the kind of behavior I am addressing. If you'd rather avoid these, I'd understand if this is where you want to bounce. If that's the case, then thanks for watching.
What a fucking nigger. Jeez, oh my god.
You fucking nigger! Ow!
You're gonna want to wash the taste of my dick out of your mouth.
Why, are you gay?
I'm actually gay.
Cool. You like dick then? I mean,
I do, so don't say faggot.
Faggot?
Nigger. It's competitive. If you're not taking this game seriously, just go click, play.
Well, I don't take it seriously that I scream at people like an asswipe.
I don't play with gold. Big black nigger, big black nigger, big black fucking fat nigger, big black nigger.
This time, I don't think it's just a coincidence. It's not as simple as, well, games don't create toxic people just find games. Perhaps that is indeed the case. Video games don't create toxic behavior, and assholes just so happen to play the very same games everyone else does. I think it's a combination of the two. I think toxic behavior exists because video games reward it, sometimes directly, but mostly indirectly. Really, it all stems from what makes the internet so much fun, the lack of accountability. Almost anyone can say almost anything they want and get away with it too. This idea bleeds into gaming too. Some games bite back on bad behavior, like Rainbow Six Siege. Team killing will net you a huge score penalty and may result in a suspension from matchmaking for a while. Gran Turismo Sport deals time-based penalties based on rules similar to the FIA, the real-world association that makes the rules for motorsports like Formula 1 and the World Endurance Championship. Of course, it doesn't work perfectly, nor does it completely prevent poor sportsmanship, but Polyphony Digital is definitely trying. And of course, Blizzard is trying to fight back against toxic behavior in Overwatch, a game supposed to be all about the positivity of human nature, but it's a pretty daunting task.
You know, the world could always use more heroes.
It's for that reason why I think toxic online behavior isn't limited to violent video games like Call of Duty, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or Battlefield. No matter where you go, what genre you find yourself playing, you'll always run into assholes. Of course, unsportsmanlike behavior is much different than toxic behavior. Getting teabagged after a tense 1v1 in Rainbow Six Siege definitely doesn't feel great, but it is in no way, shape, or form equivalent to being called sexually or racially derogatory terms. That is what being toxic is. That is what I really want to address. We're no strangers to shock humor. The idea that something incredibly offensive or shocking is in and of itself funny. I get it. It's the crux of Holocaust jokes or racist jokes. They play upon your understanding of people or events, and you almost can't help but laugh at how shockingly offensive something is, almost purely as a defense mechanism. Sometimes, when someone makes one of these jokes, it's not born from a place of racism or sexism per se, but it does come from a place of ignorance, I think. On the topic of seeing or hearing it in a game chat, allowing your frustration to bubble up so much to the point where you feel like you have to say something offensive is a sign of immaturity. It comes from the desire to feel like you need to tear someone down, to bring them down to the level of feeling that you're at. It's emotional communism. Well, I'm in a terrible mood now, so I need other people to understand how frustrated I am. It's no excuse, I know. I'm just trying to explain the thought process that sometimes goes into saying these terrible things in video games. And of course, they don't think those exact words, but on a purely subconscious level, I think it's fair to assume that might be the reasoning behind it at times. And of course, some people just really are racist, sexist, or homophobic. I'm getting off track, I know. However, these intense feelings of negativity and verbal violence all circle back to one of the core ideas I'm trying to present. Do video games make people more toxic? Can they make someone more violent on a micro level or on a verbal level? Let's recap. I think violent video games can increase the likelihood of violence occurring, but they don't in any way directly cause violence. They can cultivate thoughts of violent acts or images, and as a result can potentially make an individual more violent. Video games can cause bad attitudes, but it stems from their ability to immerse and their connectedness. Teenagers have a lot of hormonal issues and emotional immaturity to deal with, so naturally video games may cause an extension of that to appear in real life and online. The internet's inherent lack of accountability subconsciously encourages people to partake in unsportsmanlike behavior. This lack of accountability is also why many feel comfortable in engaging with verbal violence. Combine frustration, possibly from cognitive dissonance, with a lack of accountability, and toxicity is almost guaranteed to occur. There's one major question left then. What can we do to fix this? How do we stop toxicity, if that's even possible? How do we create universally positive and inclusive environments? The short answer to all of these questions is simple. You can't. That might sound depressing, but the fact of the matter is that there are too many different people in this world and connected online in order to influence online behavior in one singular direction. It's easy to say, just mute them and move on, but the knowledge that there are people out there just getting away with dropping the N-word nonchalantly is incredibly frustrating to many people. Unfortunately, that's about all we can do. Mute them, report them, then move on. The good news is, however, that not everyone's an asshole. There's a game for everyone out there, but not every game is for everyone. The key is personal discovery. It's hard to find games and communities that click, but don't give up. There is a place for you, that I can guarantee. Nothing is going to stop someone from being an asshole online. Maybe the threat of punishment in one form or another could prevent it, but can external forces really change someone? Ousting people on social media seems to do the trick on a surface level, but it's easy to feign change when confronted by the masses online. I believe change can only occur from within, and instead of seeking to destroy someone for being an asshole, we should strive to teach them to be better. What's better, completely eliminating someone from society, or forming them into a valuable ally for the future? Maybe we should seek a combination of the two, a phoenix approach, break them down and hope they can rebuild themselves back up. This is why talking about video games is important. We can take certain ideologies from years of playing and talking and apply them to our average lives. We can take all we know and work to make social environments, both physical and virtual, better places. Violent or otherwise controversial video games are often hard to talk about, but they can provide some of the most important discussions we can have. They're also some of the only games to gain mainstream traction, though as anyone who has been hardwired into the industry for long enough can attest, it's usually for the wrong reasons. In part 2 of this series about violent video games and their effects, I'm going to talk about the media's treatment of controversial video games and why it's always so frustrating. See you then!